So Jonathan Johnson, French football specialist based in Paris. You can hear me most often these days on the continent, which is a Football Ramble podcast. So yeah, that's probably the place that you'll be hearing me the most during the World Cup.
Cool. Let's kick off this way. How did France respond to losing the last World Cup?
Obviously, it was a huge disappointment. I think because it feels like it's so far in the past now, it's. I think people maybe forget just how tense it was with the situation, given that Messi and Mbappe, the two main protagonists of the final, were both PSG teammates at the time. Obviously, Neymar was still a PSG player at that point as well, even though Brazil fell earlier in the tournament. So I think many people forget just how narrative rich the World Cup was from a French perspective. Also, the fact that it was kind of the beginning of France being pretty underwhelming at international tournaments as they've been in recent outings, notably in the Euros, but also showing that they really have that winning mentality that ultimately enables them to grind their way into the latter stages, if not into the final itself. So I think many people were quite proud of the French team after the 2022 World Cup because nobody expected them to go all the way, and then to compete the way that they did in the final with that incredible, almost standoff really between Mbappe and the Argentina team. So I think many people have fond memories of it, but equally, I think it felt like an opportunity missed, especially when you look at some of the chances that the French players passed up. I know many people will still remember Colin Muani up against Emi Martinez, and obviously the agony of losing a final on penalties, especially one that had been so entertaining and end-to-end and went literally all the way through extra time as well.
He could have squared it to Mbappe, baby. I'm thinking. How is this World Cup being anticipated by French fans and French media, if you find any difference between the two?
I think there's a quiet confidence now. I think many people feel like France are established as heavyweights at these international tournaments, and they expect a Didier Deschamps special in terms of tournament management and the fact that it's probably not going to be until the latter stages, at least until the knockout phases, when France and the most creative players really start to be allowed off of the leash. I think many people have come to expect from Didier Deschamps and France at international tournaments that the group stage will be very results oriented. It won't be aesthetically pleasing a lot of the time. And then depending on the matchups that come straight out of the group phase, then we might start to see a little bit more imagination and creativity. But in terms of what's feeding the confidence in France, whether it's the press, whether it's the fans, I think it's just this feeling that France has never had such a deep pool of talent, especially in those sort of creative and attacking positions. So there is definitely a sense of optimism that France won't find scoring goals as difficult as they did at the last Euros, and that Didier Deschamps perhaps has a very strong chance of leaving on an absolute high and handing over the expectation, obviously, being that Zinedine Zidane, picks up the slack after Deschamps leaves. And I think there's a feeling that Deschamps will be handing over a winning team to Zidane when that transition happens.
Not that you fully have to go with the metaphor, but I've been asking people to kind of put on the stethoscope and the scrubs and to diagnose for me the condition of the nation that they follows football. So where is French football, both domestically and its ability to export players? Would you call it healthy, not healthy? Where is it?
Geez, wow. Economically, I think we're probably DOA in terms of where Ligue 1 is like right now financially. But the weird thing about it is that I don't think, honestly, that in a continental sense, in terms of competing in UEFA competitions, that French football has been this strong for a long, long time. I think, looking at PSG making it to two finals back to back, three consecutive semi-finals, obviously sandwiched in between that was the Champions League title success itself. I think there is now a sense that PSG are established, obviously as the flagship French team, but a team that are very much capable of winning the big titles now. which wasn't the case before. I think it's frustrating this season because I think Strasbourg had a huge opportunity in the Conference League to bring some extra respect to Ligue 1, and how the teams perform in Europe has become extremely important to those clubs because of the way that international TV rights revenue is divided up between the teams since the CVC bailout deal that ultimately enabled Ligue 1 to restructure itself with a view to becoming a more serious threat in terms of the European competitions, but something that has also seen the competition really unable to stem the bleeding domestically in terms of sorting itself out for the TV rights. It's difficult for me to imagine that French football will remain in this extremely difficult position and harsh economic environment if PSG were to win a second consecutive Champions League title. I feel like there's just too much talent. There's too many stories, too many big clubs in France to not have a major TV rights deal. It feels to me like it's a matter of time before certain egos allow that situation to be resolved. And I think everybody knows that right now, France is arguably the most talent-rich nation in all of football. And it feels like that well of talent is nowhere close to running dry at this moment in time, which is a huge boost for the French clubs, because I think we'll continue to see them spending very small amounts of money, bringing players through the youth academy and ultimately trying to cash in on them while they still try to offset the difficult TV rights revenue situation. So I'd say a very mixed bag. But ultimately, on the international stage, French football is in very good health. On the continental stage, improving health. Domestic stage, obviously, it's seen many better days.
Why did the Parisian suburbs hold so much talent? Like, what are the cultural, historical reasons, maybe, why that exists in the way that it does? I remember a statistic saying, like, maybe the last World Cup, that the two cities that had the most players were Sao Paulo and the Parisian suburbs, and it was the Parisian suburbs by a wide margin. What is it about it?
Yeah, I think the thing about the Parisian suburbs is you have a lot of high quality facilities for these young kids to go and play football, but you also have a great sense of a mix of different cultures, people coming from different backgrounds. And I think when that manifests itself on a football pitch, these players get an education of a very high quality at a very young age. And that enables them to immediately move through the club system, which obviously for decades has been adapted extremely well to funneling young talent into the senior teams at professional level as quickly as possible before obviously exporting them outside of France, going to big competitions like the Premier League, like the Bundesliga, like La Liga, and has not seen as much of that talent sort of stay domestically. I think that's why you see some of those products as well of those sort of rich suburb talent basins coming back to France and being celebrated, like Paul Pogba coming back with Monaco. It's obviously not gone according to plan in terms of his fitness and his availability on the field, but the fact that he has finally come back to get a sample of French domestic football, given that he left when he was so young from Le Havre, I think that's been a sense of real pride for French football fans, because ultimately he is one of the poster boys of a system that works extremely well. And few cases are better in terms of highlighting, just how incredible some of those talents on the doorsteps of a club like PSG are, and the fact that PSG's project has turned in the last couple of years to really focus on making sure that they hoover up as much of that talent as possible after years and years of either that talent passing underneath their noses or them not being able to expedite said talents explosion onto the professional scene quickly enough, which has seen some players, likes of Kingsley Coman, for example, a very pertinent case study, given that he scored the winning goal for Bayern Munich in a Champions League final against PSG. So I definitely think that it is all of these different cultures and backgrounds mixing together that helps to make sure that Paris or the Parisian suburbs remain arguably the most fertile breeding ground for professional footballers, arguably in the world right now. The other thing I would say as well is the lower levels of French football, where youth teams start to mix with senior teams that have players of older ages in it. I think that is an extremely good way of maturing young players far faster than a lot of their continental rivals are able to do.
I'm going to fold these next two questions together. It's going to be, how did France qualify? And why Deschamps for this time? Like, why wasn't the transition made to somebody different?
That's a good question. I think a large part of the explanation for that is political. I think if you look at the way that France qualified, they were never really under any pressure. I think, with all due respect to some of the teams that France came up against in qualifying, they were favourites to qualify from start to finish. I think we've seen France be a little patchier in the Nations League, but it depends who you talk to, really, as to how seriously some people take that competition. And I think, really, in terms of Deschamps, the criticism has never been that France are not competitive enough in these international competitions. It's that Didier Deschamps seems to not want to tap into the immense potential of the players that he assembles in these squads, because quite often it feels like he never really allows them to play with the handbrake off, or sometimes by the time he allows them to take the handbrake off, they're in a position of difficulty where either they're staring at elimination or they haven't done enough in terms of their attacking output in the competition to really build up enough momentum to be free scoring to overcome certain international teams that play different styles. So I'd say that in terms of Deschamps, it's always been a question of whether he steps aside, not whether he's removed from his position. Obviously, the change at the head of the FFF, the French Football Federation, could have seen Didier Deschamps removed. But in order for somebody to take a decision like that, it would make them immensely unpopular, given everything that Deschamps has achieved for the French national team, not only as manager, but also as a player as well. Because let's not forget, he won the World Cup as a player as well as a coach. So I think it was only natural that Didier Deschamps would be allowed to decide when he stepped aside instead of being moved forcibly aside. And it feels natural, especially given the amount of time that Zidane has been out of the game, that Zidane is waiting in the wings to take over from Deschamps.
Cool. Maybe we'll discuss Zidane the next World Cup, but I want to be cognizant of the clock. So everyone raves about the talent that France have, obviously. I'm going to go position groups. Which position groups do you feel are in the best moment, and which give you the most concern relative to the squad itself?
I think the biggest position of concern is nothing new for France. I think definitely fullbacks. And fullbacks, I'd say, are problematic for most teams, whether we're talking about international level or club level. I think there are extremely few really top class kind of fullbacks, and that's why we've seen a lot of players develop into these kind of hybrid players where they're sort of part fullback, part wingback, part winger, all kind of rolled into one. And there's very few players that excel in those kind of positions, aside from perhaps PSG's elite duo of Hakimi and Mensch on either side of the defense. So I think looking outside of the fullback position, I would say that goalkeeper is also probably the position that maybe worries Didier Deschamps the most. I think all of the potential contenders for the three spots at this summer's World Cup have had moments of doubt. Obviously, Maignan has been afforded a decent amount of time to prove himself capable of being France's starting goalkeeper. But if you look at what's happened with Lucas Chevalier recently, there's been a lot of speculation as well that Hugo Lloris might be brought back as France's third choice goalkeeper because Chevalier hasn't played enough over the course of his debut season with PSG. There's big doubts as well about Brice Samba and his inconsistent form in Ligue 1, not just at the end of his time with Lens, but the entire time that he's been with Rennes for the last couple of seasons. So it's a tricky one in terms of the goalkeepers. The hierarchy isn't as well established as it used to be when it was Lloris, Mandanda, and then Areola as the third choice. So I'd say that those are probably the two areas that are giving Deschamps the most food for thought at the moment. So it wouldn't be a surprise for me if we continue to see certain players being played out of position. I know people who are familiar with the French national team and have seen them develop over the last couple of years feel that Koundé, is more of a fullback than a centre back, despite the fact that he is still a very capable central defender as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how Deschamps balances all of that out. But for me, I certainly feel like I'm not going to say the most talent poor positions, but the positions that have a finite amount of talent in them are definitely the fullback positions and the goalkeeper hierarchy.
Let's talk the fun stuff. Mbappe, Dembele, Olise, Cherki, Barcola, Doué. How would you organize this, and which players do you think are in the best moment at the top end of the pitch?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, because obviously when we're talking about Mbappe, we're not just talking about one of the superstars of world football at the moment. We're also talking about a player who kind of feels like he's been in flux ever since he left PSG. Obviously, must be galling for him to see PSG succeeding so much without him. And also a number of the problems that were very well documented at PSG have followed him to Real Madrid. I don't think that will be lost on anybody. And at the end of the day, Deschamps continues to stand by Mbappe as his captain and the talisman of his team. Yet you have the current reigning Ballon d'Or winner, Ousmane Dembele, in the same team. And it's difficult to look past those two being automatic starters when you're talking about how to divide up the talent. I think that there are some players who are only just starting to establish themselves at international level, so logically will not feature as heavily. So Cherki, I would expect to see fairly sparingly. Olise obviously is maybe the exception, where he has stamped his mark on the French national team in a very short space of time. And I think he was able to do that. And that was expedited by the fact that he was one of the players who opted to represent France at the Olympics and sort of got himself on the international radar in a different way to some of the other players. But Cherki, I think, had to make the move to Manchester City and had to show what he was capable of at that high level in order for Deschamps to take him seriously in terms of bringing him to the international tournaments. So I think perhaps the international tournaments beyond this summer's World Cup are probably the ones where we will see Cherki feature most prominently. That said, I think there's always room for a wild card who performs extremely well in the preparation games and then ultimately finds themselves not far from the starting 11 at the very beginning of the tournament. So I think really the question right now is, if Mbappe's current problems continue, does Deschamps have a difficult decision to make, where he maybe not only has to look at alternatives for Mbappe in the starting 11, but obviously then has to identify somebody who can potentially take over the captain's armband if Mbappe is not on the field? And does that suddenly turn into a huge controversy, the likes of which we've seen in the past, obviously for massively different reasons, when it's kind of been Benzema versus Deschamps in terms of, the then Real Madrid man being called up or not being called up. So yeah, it's certainly shaping up to be a really interesting one in terms of the dynamics in that attacking area. But I feel like there is maybe a spot for a wild card like a Desiree Doué to potentially step in and really make a place in the starting 11 for France their own.
Do you think Deschamps would prefer to have like an out and out number 9 and then play these kind of attacking forwards off of like a Giroud archetype? Like, do you think that would be his ideal way of playing, or is he fine maybe with like a fluid front 3, front 4, however it's going to look?
I think he does like to have the target man profile available to him, and that's why I'm pretty confident we will still see Randall Colomwani going to the World Cup as part of this squad, despite what's been a pretty forgettable season for him at club level. But I think Didier Deschamps has shown that he likes to have a bit of variety, so he has the potential to play with that flowing front three, but also can take things back to basics a little bit and play with more of a target man. So, and France have had major success with that in the past with Olivier Giroud, but Giroud hasn't been getting any younger. He's been having more and more physical problems. He's performed respectably since returning to Ligue 1, but in terms of being able to still contribute something at senior international level, sort of when you get into your 40s, realistically, I can't see a surprise recall to shake things up in terms of having that physical presence up top. It feels to me like Randall Colomwani will probably be the exception to the general rule in terms of the attacking selections.
In one word, maybe two, Pogba's not going to be in the squad, is he?
No, not. Yeah,
Okay.
I think the thing for Pogba, and I think this actually lends itself to an interesting discussion on a few other players. I think for Pogba, if he was physically fit, his form wouldn't matter that much. I think Deschamps would be keen to have him involved, but physical issues have kept him well away from consideration, and I think it's far too late now. The other player who I think, in my opinion, has a good case to be taken and brings a lot of experience, but seems to be being made to sweat until the very end of the season by Deschamps, is Corentin Tolisso. So if you look at Tolisso's form for Lyon over this past season, how he's been a real linchpin in that OL side that has defied the odds and been extremely competitive when people didn't really expect them to have much of a shot of getting into the Champions League. I think as long as he stays fit until the end of the season, he would be my pick to be the kind of wild card in terms of the question you were asking me about Paul Pogba coming in. We've seen Deschamps bring back N'Golo Conte and other similarly experienced players, and I think that's what makes the potential return of Hugo Lloris as third choice goalkeeper, as well as the possible inclusion of somebody like Tolisso, because those guys would bring massive amounts of experience from their successes in the past. The only thing I think that counts against Tolisso, aside from his physical condition, is the fact that it's been a while since we've really seen him in regular contention for a spot in the French national team. People easily forget that he was part of that 2018 squad that won the title in Russia. And for me, he would be a very smart player to bring along for Deschamps, because he's extremely versatile, can play all the different positions in midfield, and is still chipping in with those important goals, which have always been a hallmark of his talent.
Okay, so this is my one selfish question. You just mentioned him. Am I going to get to see N'Golo Kante start games at a World Cup, or is he just going just because everybody likes him and he's just fun to be around, or are we actually going to get to see him play?
I think the chances are, because he's still playing at a high level, that he will probably go. Obviously, he brings huge experience. He's a very likable guy to have around, and he's somebody that Deschamps trusts implicitly. So I think for me, it's difficult to imagine him not making at least the initial squad. And to be fair, Deschamps doesn't really mess around with sort of provisional squads and then cutting too many players. So I think if N'Golo Conte is in consideration, he'll probably be named in the squad outright when Deschamps has to pick his players. For me, I think the thing that has given N'Golo Conte probably a couple of extra years at international level, especially after he made the decision to move to Saudi Arabia, has probably been the lack of consistent fitness for key players who possibly could have taken over from N'Golo Conte, the likes of Boubacar Kamara, for example, who's been a crucial player for my club, Aston Villa, over the last couple of seasons, but has always fallen foul of injury at the worst possible time. And it feels like, had he had a clean bill of health, he probably would have been able to establish himself ahead of N'Golo Conte in the pecking order for this World Cup.
All right. So I've been asking people, what is success? What is failure? What's the floor? What's the ceiling? With France and Spain, it's kind of obvious what the expectations are, what success is. Anything short of winning is going to feel bad. So I'm going to ask you, if fill in the blank more or less. If France don't win the World Cup, what has gone wrong? Like, what are the things that you would pinpoint that you would say this must have happened if they don't win?
I mentioned it earlier. There might be a problem, a potential controversy, or a blow up regarding a certain key player. I think at this moment in time, it's most likely to concern Kylian Mbappe. The other possibility, I would say, is that Deschamps, again, is just not imaginative enough with the talent that he has at his disposal. France get caught out being too defensive and ultimately fall short because they don't fulfill their attacking potential. So I think, really, if we're talking about an unsuccessful World Cup for France, most people will pinpoint the fact that the transition to Zidane didn't come sooner, in my opinion.
All right. So if this team makes 3 straight World Cup finals, I was thinking about this earlier. Do they have to win it in order to be considered a better generation than 98 2000? Is there any chance that they could ever be considered greater than 98 2000 just based on how different the 2018 team would look from this team? Like, what would be considered the best French generation if they were able to get this one over the line?
I think it would definitely put them up there as one of the best French generations. I don't think there's much doubt that they're one of the most talented French generations already. I do think that they have missed the opportunity to sort of have that World Cup Euro dominance at the same time that Spain had a while back. The other thing that I would say that counts massively in terms of comparing the current French team and any potential French success compared to 1998. One, it was the first time for France. Two, it happened on home soil. And I think that influences the public feeling and sentiment towards the French national team of that era massively. So for me, I think that regardless of potential success, I think the 98 generation will always be held in higher esteem because that success ultimately took place on home soil.
Last question, John or Jonathan. Is there anything I haven't asked about France, France football culture, the French national team that you find particularly fun, interesting, that you think people should know or might want to know?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I think we've covered all the bases more or less. I expect France to have a vibrant following at this summer's World Cup, despite the obvious challenges in terms of accessing games in North America, especially the exorbitant prices, but also the travel logistic kind of headaches and stuff like that it's posing fans at this moment in time. But I think that's maybe the one topic that we hadn't covered too much, and that's definitely that France likes to bring the noise. It's always a party. The fans are great. You always guarantee a lot of passion, a lot of color, a lot of noise. And I think everybody knows that the aesthetic around France in terms of sort of the kits and the colors on the flag and stuff like that will always be on point. So I definitely think the fans that make the journey to North America will make themselves heard. The only thing that I maybe worry about a little bit is that at least the Iraq group stage game, and depending on the draw, what happens sort of outside of the group phase, maybe fade into obscurity a little bit compared with the matchups that France currently has against Senegal, Norway with Erling Haaland, and then potentially some of the bigger heavyweight clashes that come in the knockout phase.
Cool. John, where can people get you and your work?
Best place to follow me still is X, or what used to be Twitter. So at JON_Legosip. And pretty much whenever I'm talking about football or sharing sort of podcasts that I've been on or articles that I've written, that's the best place to find them. I do also have a Blue Sky account. I know some people prefer that these days, but personally, for me, old habits die hard. So I guess X/Twitter is still the best place to find me.
Both links will be in the description. Jonathan, I thank you for taking the time to do this, man.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. It's always been a pleasure. And I look forward to the next one.
My name is Amadi. I'm on Twitter as Amadoit. I'm on Instagram as Amadoit, __ on Twitter. I've done work for now. For the last 10 years, I've worked for Chelsea, for MLS, for Eintracht US. I've worked for Copa 90, The Athletic, most recently Fanatics and Tops. I'm a digital creator. I make my own content. I'm currently working on a project, actually a documentary about Senegal for the World Cup. So yeah, that's what I'm working on these days. And you can usually find my work most often on Twitter. Go to amadi-creates.com if you want to see more.
Cool. So let's kick it off this way. How is this World Cup being anticipated by Senegal fans?
All right, that's a very, very loaded question. I recently just returned from Dakar, actually, literally last week. And it's funny how on different sides of the pond, people are anticipating this differently. The expectations are the same. People have very high hopes for the team, for the success of the team. Obviously, people are very adamantly supporting. But the World Cup is not the team of Senegal for all of these fans on both sides. They both agree that the World Cup itself, the feeling around it, the anticipation they have is different this time. Not because they doubt the team will do well or will compete or represent them in a positive way on the national stage, but more that the feeling of it is not as magical, if that's the way you could put it.
Go.
Just that they're still anticipated. It's a World Cup. It's the most interesting, most looked forward to event for a lot of people outside of the U.S., and it's no different in Senegal.
How do you find that the maybe Senegalese media and the diaspora media are covering this World Cup? Is there a lot of more political things, like how many people are going to be allowed to go to games and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, that's a very big focus, obviously. Senegal is one of few countries, I think there are 4 or 5 now, who are not only having immigration bans, but bonds. So you have to pay $15,000 bond in order to enter the country. I think this Cape Verde is on there. Nigeria, I think, is on there. Ivory Coast is on there. 2 of the World Cup teams, 2 of the African World Cup teams who are going to be playing in the region, very close to here, to New York. Ivory Coast is in Philly. Senegal will be in New York or New Jersey, rather, and Boston, or rather Foxborough. So I actually, and this is going to be a world exclusive, but just recently spoke with a member of the Senegalese delegation, representative of the FA, and he informed me that Senegal anticipated this badassery. He didn't use those words, but he anticipated the fact that there would be based on the Muslim ban of 2016 when Trump was president, or maybe 17, he anticipated difficult travel issues. He anticipated problems with ICE. So what the Senegalese FA went ahead and did was secure ticketing, lodging, transportation, and just all the things you would need to ensure a strong fan presence in these cities at these games, one that can be safe, and one that can draw support from around that local community as well, one that will make people feel like they're being seen. As far as the media in Senegal, it tends to lean a little conservative, like the state the RTS is what you'd get in your home if you have nothing else, but they are obviously being quite frank about the reality of it, informing people of this is what you would have to go through, the hoops you'd have to jump through in order to attend, beyond the financial aspect, which is something entirely different, but also altogether barriers to entry that are rather unprecedented, even for people who might not have as many means as the American population who are interested in attending.
Cool. So I've been asking people to kind of like put on their doctor's outfit and diagnose for me the state of their country's football. So I'm going to ask you the same question. What's the condition of Senegalese football? Is it in a healthy place? Is it in a not healthy place? And I mean that both domestically and then its ability to export players.
Yes. Okay. So I think it's twofold. And I think for both of those things, for domestically, yes, there are academies who I've seen success, not only in exporting players, but making sure that they're keeping certain players in the, I don't know if this makes sense to say, but keeping certain players in the country who need the development and also help the program improve. Like there's that fringe player who can, maybe we can make some money off of him. Or there's the guy you build the squad in the league, the Senegalese Premier, around, try to win it, try to gain some money off of that, gain some notoriety off of that. So it's like you're flip-flopping between both of those things, where you have to kind of be honest about your squad quality and the need for certain players to beef it up. And then you also have to think, okay, can we maybe, is there a possibility if we continue to sort of nurture and grow these players into the point where they could be national team prospects, international prospects, maybe they could lead the league, things like that are sort of playing second fiddle to the quality of the overall quality. That being said, there are academies. Probably heard of Generation Foot, which is, they have a deal with FC Metz. So players sort of do 2 years here and then they go out to the FC Metz Academy, or if you're really good, you go directly. And of course, tied to that are education, the money, the possible move for a family, all that stuff that, makes, you can leave, go ahead. All that stuff that makes this sort of a life-changing event for many young African players, let alone Senegalese. It's the same difference. On the other hand, there's the sort of idea that like Senegalese football has been growing to a point, like it's been building to something. Many people thought it was the African Cup of Nations final win. I think this team has more in it. I think they've long had more in it. And when the last time we spoke, I was calling the previous, maybe it was the previous AFCON, not to this one, but the last time we spoke, I was calling maybe even saying the World Cup buildup was that this was their golden generation, and it seems like that golden generation has sort of aged like a fine wine, like the Kalidou Koulibalys, the Sadio Manes, who's still a team leader, who's not just leading from the bench but with his performances. I feel like this is their last hurrah. Those players, the Edouard Mendy's, those guys. Maybe Edouard Mendy has more in him because he's a goalkeeper, but I feel like, you get to the age that they're at, and you have to be honest about it. Are you going to play again in 4 years? Is your level going to be high enough in 4 years to compete with the Iliman Ndiaye's, with the young guy? Like, to be fair to them and to be honest about your career, you might want to be one of the more El Hadj Dioufs on the sideline helping people. Like your role might be different. Is all I'm saying. I'm not trying to hate on anybody at all, but the reality is the reality. I think this is the peak of their powers, where they're mixing really good quality youth players and then very experienced older players with pedigree from leagues around the world. Edouard Mendy's now playing in Saudi. Mane has obviously one of the best club careers anyone has seen from a Senegalese player, let alone an African player, in a while. Matar Sarr are names that, the names that you hear now, like the Abdoulaye Secs, and the teams that are more well known are picking Senegalese players, and they're not just afterthoughts, they're starting. And if they're making those sorts of impacts on their club, it's obvious to see sort of how that the team has built up. Their belief in themselves has built up, seeing more and more of their own countrymen playing at teams and competing at the highest level. It's easy to sort of believe in the team that way as well. If you're a young player, you're saying, wow, like I'm playing alongside, or I'm training with Sadio Mane. Like, he might not be doing that in his club team, Some of these players might not have that same level of quality until they come to the national team camp and they see the level that they have, and they're like, oh wow, okay. So that alone keeps pushing people on. I think that's a good sign.
I'm going to fold these two questions together because I think they might make sense. I want to know more about your trip a little bit, and just like the vibes you were getting on the ground, and combined with that, because I'm sure it must have been a piece discussing football, the AFCON fallout of the thing going to Morocco and walking off the pitch and all of that. So, like, if you could combine those two things, just give me a good story or two, that'd be dope.
Yeah. Okay. So one, it was the perfect time to go. It's the fervor from the African Cup of Nations and the build up to the World Cup are kind of like meeting. It's like two waves. And in between that was this farcical CAF decision to try to remove the trophy win. And people have responded. There are trophies painted because people are responding so positively, saying we're never going to give it up. And even the way the Senegalese players took it with them to their friendly matches in France, paraded it around, people in Senegal are very possessive of this win. It's not going anywhere. And even if people were to say, yes, the Moroccan team has taken it, no Senegalese person on this side of the pond or the other would ever accept that verdict, ever. They don't care. The ship is long sailed, okay? And beyond that, it's the sort of the thing that caught my eye the most was young kids. Everyone has a kid on, man. I mean, I'm not talking like, oh, well, they wore the kit from like the 2002 win against France, major kit vibes. I appreciate that as someone who wears a kit almost every day. But I'm talking the kits from the AFCON, especially that dark green one that they wore in the final. It's all you see. And like, there's no better way to explain this. I went to a bodega, or what they call like what they would literally call a corner store, and I'm wearing a kit, but it's not a Senegalese kit, and I got called out by a young kid for wearing, and it wasn't even like I was wearing, like, it wasn't like a national team, like this is a futsal kit. It was some one off, but he was like, "Why aren't you wearing Senegal colors?" And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I don't have a good answer. Like, you're right. Why am I not?" And that alone was just like, and it wasn't just that. Like, I mean, it's everywhere you go, it's the same vibe. People are hyped up for something that they feel like they're a part of, like it's theirs. They possess it. They possess that trophy just as much as the team does, and I don't know, man. It's something really infectious about that. Something so pure and honest about just wanting to be part of something great, and it's so palpable. And I think that was really the best way to explain it.
Cool. Let's get into qualification. So Senegal, how easy or not easy was the qualification, given that Africa now have almost double the slots?
Yes, they have almost double the slots, and it was grueling. But this is one of the reasons I believe Senegal is so serious. Their preparation, the games that they played against challenging teams. I mean, they had DRC to play, and that was really the closest team to come to try to top them. But Senegal topped their qualifying points. They were, I mean, it's just they look like the full package. And even when they didn't have a full team, they didn't have their best players out, or they didn't start some players because they were coming from coming off of break and starting in their club teams. They have what it takes in reserve to see off games, maybe against the quality of only the African continent, but that might extend to teams on the European and the South American continent. I mean, that they should have belief in their depth, despite having those marquee players everybody knows. The Nico Jacksons, the Sadio-Manes, Pep Gueye. Everybody knows those guys, but there are people on the bench who can step up, and I think there are competition for certain positions, particularly in defense and in midfield. So, I mean, I really do think that they skated through it, and as many people would say they should, but that's a statement in and of itself, and it builds so much belief in the team. So, qualifying was not a cakewalk, because any game in Africa is not. Whatever pitch you're playing on, the referees you have to deal with, and it's just a fact. And people may say, "Oh, well, it's not denigrating anything. It's just a reality of playing in Africa." Like, you might have to go you're gonna have travel issues. Your bags might get lost. Like, things happen, and these stories happen every year. So I don't, I'm not trying to denigrate anybody. You can look it up yourself. But even despite that, they were able to go through and top it, and I just feel like that's a statement. So,
what's been the form since qualification? So the last international break that we had, who did they play? And do you know who they have scheduled to play before the World Cup?
This is one of the things I'm most interested in. So I know they played, I want to say they played Peru in Paris. And that was, I think, 2-0 win. And just, I don't want to get this wrong, so I'm just going to look it up, because I just sworn.
Playing in Paris is interesting.
Senegal beat Peru 2-0, and then was that their most recent game? It might have been. I just don't want to say something wrong. Yeah, no, they beat Gambia also March 31st, 3-1. So their next game, the game that as I said I'm most interested in currently, is March 31st, and that game is Senegal against U.S. men's national team in Charlotte. And it's the second to last warm-up game for them, but it's I think the most important game before the World Cup. The next game is, I think they play Iraq on maybe the 4th of June. Like, it's their last warm-up game. I mean, before the World Cup. But the U.S. game in Charlotte, they're playing on American soil. It'll be pretty hot by then, I'm imagining. It'll mimic how it's going to be at MetLife Stadium and also in Foxborough. There's going to be some American fans. I don't know how that's going to go, what the sort of hostile environment might be, if it might not be. It might be all friendly. Who knows? But this is a really good test on American soil a month before the tournament against the hosts. It's kind of ideal. And I'm looking at that as one of the true tests. I mean, if you look at Senegal's group, Norway, Iraq, Senegal, France, there's no real doubt that I think Senegal has a chance, but a team like the U.S. men's national team kind of falls in the middle of all those teams, and they'd be a great test to sort of gauge yourself against before you go up against these teams.
Yeah, so let's talk about Pape Thiaw. How are fans feeling about him in particular? Is he maybe like the leader of the vanguard, or like how are fans with him in this
Honestly,
moment?
I think that fans really appreciate him and his stewardship. Only maybe they weren't as convinced as they are now, but the way that he galvanized the team walk off, and for right or wrong, okay, for right or wrong, we're not judging here. We're just saying the way that the team responded to him, that he has the dressing room. You know that they're behind him. And yes, Mane is the team leader. He's the guy who sort of got the team back out and galvanized the fans and the team and worked together to make sure that was like not an issue. But Pape Thiaw, that takes a really big leader. It takes someone who has belief in their own ability to lead, not only the backing of their team, but that, I'm going to make this call and they're going to go with me. It looks horrible if you go. It looks like a Kepa. It looks like a Kepa at Wembley moment if he does that, and everyone's like, just like, like. But like the way Mbappe has did to Xabi Alonso before his or was it to Xabi Alonso? Maybe I'm wrong.
No. You're right. Yeah. You're right.
So I mean, I just think that you can see the way they respond to him, and I think that having AFCON this close to the World Cup was crucial for him. Not just for the players in the team, but it's huge for him. He gets a free test at seeing his team in a tournament, right? Away from home, but also pretty close. So like, hostile environment, but also with your small backing. It's as similar as you can get to playing in the World Cup, where you're going to have foreign fans, teams you don't play against often, but that you have some sort of history with. There's the sort of randomness of the World Cup or any cup competition, where things just happen. And I think that that's a wonderful test for them 5 months ahead of having this sort of marquee pinnacle moment that only comes around every 4 years. I think Pape Thiaw is the rightful successor of Aliou Cisse, and the fact that they both played for the team. I mean, the continuity there is great. El Hadji Diouf being on the bench and the coaching staff. I mean, it feels like this amalgamation of the best of Senegalese football and over the past 20 years. And I'm excited to see how it all comes together.
So let's talk about the players. You mentioned the kind of old guard. It's funny. I had it written down as the last dance, if you will, for Sadio Mane, Koulibaly, Gay, Mendy. I had written down, but I think you're right because he's a goalie. Maybe he could have another World Cup. So
they have longevity, unfair longevity, and it's like it's not right. No one else gets to do this, but somehow they do. Like.
So maybe talk to me about like those core three, the spine of that team: Koulibaly, Idrissa Gana Gueye, and Mane. Like, what moment do you think they're in? And then, I'm going to ask you to remember this part. Which of the younger generation do you think are ready to step up in this moment?
Okay, so remember that for the end. Who's like?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. I would say of the three, and people probably don't think this when they think of Koulibaly, Idrissa Gana Gueye, and Mane, who are like the outside of Mendy, the old guard. I think Gana is the most crucial of the three. He plays in the very middle. A lot of the attacks and the defense goes through him. He's the cool head in front of the back four protecting them. He's the guy who sees the whole field and is kind of everybody turns on his back. Yes, Mane is the focal point for the attack, but the ball's coming out of the back hit Gana Gueye. He's the guy tracking runs to the midfield, telling the guy the CBs to pick up. Like, and if you watch him at Everton, I mean, people might say, "Oh, this is a good argument." And a friend of mine made this argument the other day. They say, people always say, "Oh, how is Pickford starting for the English national team?" But it's like Pickford starts every single game for his club, every single game. Gana is like that too. He's one of the first names on the team sheet for a reason. Consistency in a position that requires it, that requires a cool head. I mean, I saw him. My personal taste for him grow more like as I saw how much responsibility he takes on. The previous AFCON showed it too, but just seeing him week in, week out, also playing in the Premier League, the best league in the world, as many people say, for a club that has had its struggles, but has required him to be a leader in a team that was sort of bereft of it besides him and Pickford. And I think that the consistency is so huge. It is. Like, you don't get picked if you're not good enough. And no matter how much a team may struggle, if they're playing in the Prem, they've got quality players. And if he's standing out enough to play and start as often as he was and as often as he does, I think that it speaks for itself. Obviously, when he was at PSG, people didn't doubt him, So I don't know. I think, again, this being his probable last hurrah, he'll give it everything. But the AFCON, he didn't seem like he was an old player, the way he was running up and down the field, giving it everything. I got to give it to him.
Yeah. Mane, do you think he's in a good moment? And center backs are almost like goalies in the sense too. Like they can age well. And I think
age well.
Yeah.
But Koulibaly, I don't want anyone to hate me for this, but I never thought Koulibaly was like. I think he's solid. I never thought he was generational or any of that. And I'm not talking about his. I'm not talking about his.
Is the Chelsea spell messing with you?
It's not that. I feel like even at Napoli, when he was at his best, he was quick enough. And I'm not saying this, to any. I'm an old man too, so for the record, he was quick enough to correct what I think is sometimes bad positioning. So if you're out of position and the ball gets played through and you're fast enough to track your runner, you go with him. That's fine. But if you're not, someone has to cover for you, and then everybody has to, And there were more than one occasion where that was the case in AFCON. I mean, and I've seen it again. I've seen it for his club, but then again, the pace is different, and with these guys playing now in Saudi, even for a guy who's a center back, you kind of get exposed, and it's not necessarily. I don't know. I wouldn't just say it's about speed either. I mean, reading the game and the speed of the game comes and goes with your own fitness and your own form, I believe, as a player. Like, when you're fully fit, you see everything ahead of time. Like your balance is good. You're not recovering or reacting. You're proactive. And I feel like he does a lot more reacting, even at his level of quality, which is sometimes satisfactory, but that can really hurt you. So I don't think that he's not good enough. I just think that that's one of the things that shows more in his game as he ages. I think Mane is a tournament player. I think he's built for this. I think he'll be able to give his all, whatever that might be, for as many times as he's needed. I don't doubt that. And he's more than that. He's a talisman. So I feel like he understands he needs to show out. Even if he's not having the best game, he needs to be working hard. It's great players, especially the great players who don't always play well, but who were on the field. That's what I'm needing from him for this tournament. And the young guys who will pick up that slack when he gets tired. I mean, I'm looking for Iliman. Iliman's my favorite Senegalese player currently. It's just he plays with such fearlessness and flair and confidence. Like, he's gonna beat you. He's not just gonna beat you. He's gonna fake you out like bad. Like, it's gonna be bad. And he has this. All right, it didn't work this time. I'm gonna do it again next time. Like, he has this fearlessness that I feel like only younger players have. And then Habib Diarra, I think, is a guy to look out for. Boulaye Dia. Pape Matar Sarr is not old, or he's not young. I wouldn't say like young, but I mean, I'm trying to age myself here. Like, he's not young, but he's young. And I think that core so much grew up on. In fact, I watched a special about it, about academy players talking about the Senegalese national team winning AFCON and also winning it the first time, and what that felt like for them. And it's the same thing. I think that those guys watched them, win these things, and now they're playing with them, and the boost you get from that, I think, is huge. And I don't know that tournament play is a good enough way to assess their overall quality. But some players break out in these sorts of situations, and I don't know. I'm hoping that all three of those guys do. Yeah, those would be my younger guys to watch. Mostly, I think. Yeah, mostly those three of all.
Cool. All right, so I think I have 4 more questions left, but they're relatively quick. What is Senegal's floor and what is their ceiling, considering this is objectively the most difficult group at the World Cup?
Their floor would be they win one, they draw one, they lose one. And their ceiling is they win every game.
Okay.
No, I mean, honestly, I think that if they beat France at MetLife, they'll win every game. I think they'll win every other game. But losing to France at MetLife shouldn't be their make or break for this group. I feel like they have to be honest with themselves. Winning 2 of these games is possible. I think they could beat Iraq. I think they could beat Norway. Winning 2 of those matches and expecting to lose to France is not a smart strategy either, because you never know what could happen. But yeah, their ceiling would be winning all the games or drawing France and winning the other 2, which would be probably like their best case scenario if they were being honest with themselves.
Yep. But I mean, like in the tournament. So like, yeah. I was setting up their challenge just based on getting out of the group. But like,
getting out of the group. Okay, so their floor being then just getting out of the group and losing in the knockout rounds, and the ceiling would have to be getting past their best ever finish. So at least getting to the quarterfinals and hopefully winning a game.
Do you think Morocco getting to the semi kind of opens kind of a new paradigm for African football, that like Senegal is objectively on Morocco's level, perhaps 100%. Even better in some instances, depends on the day. If they can get to a semi, then surely Senegal, if the cards are kind of shuffled correctly, you could repeat that. So I do think Morocco has kind of shown away in that instance. What pressure is there to be successful, and what is success to you?
I think there's a lot of pressure to be successful. I think that there's a sort of like, people in Senegal say bulbai, like bulbai, don't let go of it. Don't let go of it. You know, it's like a popular in some music and stuff like that. People like to say that saying. But I think that there's a feeling of, we won this AFCON and now it's ours and we can't let go of this feeling, because if we do, then someone else is going to swoop in, and they want to be the African team everyone's talking about this World Cup. They want to be the headline makers, who the improbable this and that. And there's sort of an underdog mentality, but that has wavered over the years. Like, now people believe in the team. They're not underdogs. They're like, we should win stuff. You know, like why wouldn't we win? And that is sort of refreshing to me. And because for such a long time, you as a fan, you going into matches where you don't expect necessarily to be the best team or to win, and like, you know, having improbable victories, to switching up and being like, yeah, we should win this, is a nice feeling. But it's also sort of like, it's scary. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the way that you expect to follow your team or to support your team, and those things switch up. But it's good to have the same sort of belief. So yeah, I think that people have high expectations because of where Senegalese football is today, but I don't think that people are like having their heads on Mars, being like, we're going to win the World Cup. You know what I mean? Like this, we're not. So yeah, that's how I
got
put
you.
it.
I got you. So who is your pick to win the World Cup?
I would honestly, if they show up, it should be France. I think they have the most depth, like the most depth, and at least right now, the most players in form and fit. Because Brazil just lost Estevao. People are dropping left and right.
Bro, today, Yamal, I think it's
Yamal also.
Yeah, so hamstring. They said hamstring. So I don't. It hasn't been diagnosed yet. But
playing too many games.
They said Estevao. This is completely off the. I've never heard of a four grade 4. I thought it went to 3.
Bro, I didn't know. Yo,
I thought thought
And
it went to 3.
the way
Like,
people
what
are
is
talking about
4?
it,
What does that mean? Does he not have one anymore? What does that mean?
it sounds like it's gone. It sounds like it's straight up gone. They said that grade 3, the muscle is not on the bone. They have to reattach using the tendon.
So if it's grade 4, that means did it disappear? Like, what are we talking about? Anyway. So last question. Is there anything I haven't asked about Senegalese football culture? I really wanted to ask about the diaspora that exists in the New York metro area. Okay. Something about that, but
I'm doing a project on that right now.
Okay.
My dad, back in, I want to say 81 or 82, when he first arrived here, helped create the Senegalese Association of America, which is based in Harlem, which has a huge Senegalese diaspora. In fact, I don't know if anybody watching this may have seen it. After AFCON, I took a video on 116th and St. Nick. Insanity. I'm talking cars flying down the street, people out their windows, on top of roofs. It was nuts. And that kind of was I was going down there for that, but to have the response and the reaction that happened I couldn't have planned it. But at the same time, that community is so vibrant, so proudly Senegalese, so inviting. There were people dancing with cops, the NYPD, the same NYPD. Yes, the very same NYPD, like dancing, celebrating, no pushing, no nothing, no, the cops were mad. Like the vibe is very different there. It's very much feels like, I'm in New York City, but I'm not. And my favorite food spots there has no name on the front. You have to just go upstairs and people are eating. The meal that they have is what they made. The meal that they have is what they made that morning, and it's guaranteed fire. But it's so nice to think about what that community will look like in 3 or 4 months. That the Senegalese flags are going to be up, above people's shop windows, and people are going to be out in their kits the same way that it was when I was in Dakar a couple weeks ago. Like, it's the same vibe, but just with a different flavor. And I really appreciate watching sort of the development and the discovery of this neighborhood and this community by other people. And it's only going to grow more in the World Cup. And I feel like people are really going to enjoy it because the pricing of tickets is going to push a lot of people out. And that's one of the places where you can definitely go and watch games. So
cool. No, it sounds dope. I'm anticipating the project that you got going. So that should be cool. One last time, where can people find you and your work?
You can find me on Twitter at Amaduit _, or go to amadi-creates.com and all my links are there.
Cool. Amadi, I always appreciate these and thank you for taking the time, bro.
Appreciate you.